Morning, Richard. How are you doing?
Morning, morning, fellow Data Dick. I am all
Yeah, I
right.
should have introduced you as Dick, shouldn't I?
I know I said I wasn't going to dick around this morning, but I can't. It's just my default setting, I'm afraid.
That's fair enough.
No man flu this week.
Good, fully recovered.
No hay fever. Still a bit claggy though. Some nasty stuff going around.
Yeah, I know a few people that suffer, and my dog particularly is suffering. And yeah, kept us up most of the night with his constant paw licking. So hence the bags under the eyes and everything else. But
And a strange kind of sound imprinted on your head of
yeah, it's not
slurping.
a nice sound of a dog slurping at 3 in the morning. It really isn't.
I
But
think
we're alive.
something's gone wrong with your plumbing.
Yeah. I'm alive, I'm here, and I'm ready. So, we were going to chat today, Richard, about kind of what is data and obviously the preconceptions people have when they hear the word data. And I think
Yeah.
I was going to kick off with a little anecdote from Peterborough many years ago. We actually looked at implementing weather stations into multiple schools across the area. We were working with an IoT company and obviously the fibre network we were building to put these weather stations in. And obviously, Peterborough had some ambition to be the green capital of the country. I think they've had that ambition for many a year with not a huge amount done against it. But this is one of the projects that kind of aligns nicely to that. And it was to get the kids to understand weather patterns, how things like the weather, floodplains, everything affected the inner city schools versus the more rural schools, carbon monoxide levels, all of that kind of thing. But also so that the council then could actually use some of that data as well. So where we're looking at new planning applications, what that might do to the microclimate, uh,
Mm.
floodplains where the water runs off to, and various other bits. And I went to a meeting and I was talking about this actually with I'm going to name drop the chief science officer at the time, and we talked about it. We
Are
said,
we going to get sued, Richard?
"Pardon?
We're going to get sued.
We're not. No, he's
All right, fine.
retired now. We're fine." Uh, but we talked about. I mentioned this project to them, and we talked about it being kind of like maths by stealth, because ultimately with the kids you were going to talk to them about a weather lesson, and we're going to learn about the weather, and we're going to talk about the weather and the environment, the air quality, all of that stuff. That's very different to going into a lesson being told you're going to be doing data analysis or data or maths. And so it's a large part of what we do, I think, is data that we use, see, and hear about every single day, and everything we do isn't necessarily described as data, and therefore
Mm.
people kind of just run with it and work with it. The minute we call something a data project, it's something like, oh no, that's not me. That's the techies and the nerds that deal with that.
That's you get that Spider-Man meme where everyone's there pointing at each other, going, "Who's doing that? No, you're doing that. No, no, I thought you were doing that. No, no, I
Yeah,
thought you were doing it." It's like, and it just goes round in this never-ending loop. It's interesting. You talk a bit of a segue, but we talk about weather because it's one of those things that obviously, typically British, we always like to complain about the weather anyway. But I think I'm doing some work at the moment for a retailer, and they want to understand how the weather impacts their activities, their customers' behaviour, and the products they're buying, which is logical, I guess. But when you say it weaves into things, considerations like planning permission, it's a source of information, shall we say, slash data that shows how looking outside of what you perceive to be data at other sources of information that enable you to add some context of what your business is doing. So it's not relevant for everybody, for example, weather, but it can impact a lot of things. The way people travel, the way they move around is all impacted by that. So if you're looking to understand travel patterns or behavior patterns, if you layer that in, it's a source that you don't have readily available within your business. You can bring that information in and suddenly it adds a layer of context. And then if you then look at forecasts, you can then predict future behavior, potentially what to push when, what to manage when, by layering in another set of information that you would maybe not even think about. And again, to make that connection to personal life, is that if you, before you go out the door, what's the first thing you do? Unless you go up, you don't care about getting wet. If you look, you see what's going on with the weather forecast. You look at, the traffic. You look at everything. I know we touched on sat navs and things last time, but you are ingesting in your personal life a huge amount of information, which is essentially data. If you're watching something on Netflix, you look at the reviews. Well, I tend to, and you look at how long it might be on for, how many episodes, how long they are, what people are saying about them. What is that at the end of the day?
Yeah, and people, that's the big difference for me, is you don't necessarily go, I'm going to look at the data around this film. You're looking at reviews, or you're looking at information.
Unless you're a proper geek.
Yeah, unless you're a proper geek. But the weather one was interesting. You reminded me, the other reasons we were looking at it were, one, for the contact centre at the council, to see, again, behaviours, types of phone calls, manner of phone calls, tone of phone calls on certain days compared to others. And then even we were looking at we were going to look at crime levels as well. So that there was always a stat thrown around the number of burglaries and how they go up when the weather's hot, because people start opening windows and leaving windows open. Yeah. But no one's actually said, you know what, when it gets to a certain point, it's too hot. And almost like even the burglars can't be bothered to go out because it's too hot to go out.
Have to get an ice lolly on the way first. Let's go nick one from nick an ice lolly from the co-op on the way.
But no one had that information. So again, you're looking at, okay, on a hot day, is it better to have more kind of bobbies on the beat, as we used to call them?
Well, you go back a long time there.
Yeah, walking around, because you're more likely to have people jumping in and out of people's properties with windows open. Whereas on wet days, that's probably not going to happen so much. Therefore, your force can focus on other tasks. And obviously, it's never quite simple, but it's a really good example, because it's something that people, as you said, do every single day. The first thing you do is either open your curtains or look at the weather app. Is it raining? Therefore, actually, the drive's going to be slow. I'm going to have to leave a bit earlier. I've got to take.
You're making a decision based upon information you're provided with, and it's there all day long, and you're looking at it, you're checking it, you're seeing what's going on, and
you look at a weather report, not weather data.
Weather report, not weather data, but it also is a really good example of a way that you can. Again, I'm not going to try not to use jargon, because you know how much I hate jargon, but how you can enrich your own business data set with information that is readily available. And it's also things like travel patterns or traffic patterns. If you know that there's going to be delays on the tube and things like that, what do you do if there's train problems or traffic problems? We touched on traffic, I'm not going there. But if there's train problems or tube problems or anything like that, what impact does that have on what happens? Information's readily available. As a personal perspective, you will make a decision based upon that information. Why don't you do the same in business? Why don't you know when the trains are up the, you know what I mean? I don't want to get a bleep, do I? Up this chute. What's the correlation between that and what happens in that business? If you're near a big travel hub, or you rely on staff are often late, or something like that. It's just, how often can you look at that? I mean, you can make it really complicated if you want to, but you can just look at that as an overlay that's readily available, so you know that there's going to be and you can adapt your decision making accordingly.
Yeah, and in some ways it must be used by some of the organisations, because obviously you walk into Tesco and all of a sudden the barbecue stuff is out, and it's like, okay, what do you guys know that we don't? Because I'm looking outside.
You trip over it when you walk through the front door.
Yeah, there's no way we're having a barbecue today. But they obviously do plan based on what they think future trends of weather's going to be. But so many businesses don't understand what differences there are in people buying things in December, January versus people buying things later in the year, what their expectations are and where they are as a business. But like I say, there's loads of kind of open data, even sources that are readily available that you can plug into. And from my perspective, I talk about the story behind the data. So I talk about capturing all your business decisions, conversations, all of that, because that's a huge amount of data that you can then look at and go, okay, this quarter we did particularly well or particularly badly. Let's actually look at the information that tells us what we did and why we did it to see if we can correlate the two.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, that's not information that people keep hold of. That's in your brain or a hidden email or a Word document or something else. But again, even if you're not capturing it all, even if you look at it and go, there's nothing there that really helps us understand it, at least you've got it there in the first place to start looking at and going, yes, there is a pattern, or no, there isn't. And likewise with weather, you might bring the weather information in and go, we've looked at this a million different ways and we don't think there's any correlation with what we do with the weather. But that's good, because then it means that's not something that as a business you need to concern yourself with. But then the next business down the road.
Also, it's at the moment, at that moment in time, it's not relevant. But next month or the month after, it might form part of a pattern.
Yeah, and it's understanding those, isn't it, that I think helps drive you forwards as a business. But it is, excuse me, to kind of circle back to what is data, it's that thing of everything you do, the phone in your hand, the TV guide, looking out the window at the weather, everything is data. And then, I mean, I joke quite a lot about when you work in a council that it's almost like the Men in Black, the little thing they click that erases your memory. You walk through the front door and suddenly our data's their job. Someone else does data. We don't need to worry about that. I'm just going to sit here at my computer and fill all this information in. You're like, okay, I think that might be the data that we're talking about. But it's just not seen as that. It's seen as something else, something that you do or you look at.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, again, I wonder whether there is a perception that data is, again, in companies, it's purely financial information, because that's often how businesses are measured, quite rightly. Your performance is based upon profit at the end of the day, isn't it? But what that disconnect is then, well, actually, what drives the profit? What influences it? You've got revenue, costs, simplified version. Okay, well then what drives that? And then before long, you're into non-financial information, and how far down that kind of question framework do you go? Does a business generally consider to go down? It's all day. I mean, you could go. I've worked through projects and gone through decision tree, like type scenario and balanced scorecard, where you go down, and it just keeps going, because there's so many different processes and activities that is happening within this business, but they all ultimately flow up to the overall financial performance. So I wonder, I guess, a question to you is, do a lot of companies just simply look at data is financial metrics, and then they draw the line under it and go, well, everything else is operational, so we don't really care about that? Whereas actually, every financial metric is driven by non-financial activities, so they should also be measured and treated the same.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I describe what we do as kind of like the third data service. So your numbers are your number one. That is something pretty much every business in the world has to look at, measure, and monitor. Then you get kind of like the Salesforce type companies that huge focus on customer data, your customer interactions, who your customers are, how they work with you. And then, like I said, I'm then the operational data of what have you done as a business, what decisions have you made that have driven all of that. And I think finance data is probably a lot easier for most people, because you're invoicing and you're billing, you're putting your numbers into your finance system, it generates the reports. But even then, on a lot of the business courses or things I've been involved in, or memberships, they do bang home on know your numbers, understand your numbers, get those right, and everything else follows. But there is an idea that almost like as long as they're okay, everything else below that is fine. But if you can't kind of explain to me quite simply why the numbers are okay, then you're missing something. And then actually, I did have a chat with a business coach who's helping me with a couple of bits, and he said, well, should a business worry about all of this data if the numbers are fine? And it's like, well, yeah, but what's fine? A number might be good, but it could be better, it could be worse, it could drop off a cliff. How you're performing, you might say, I want to earn, I don't know, a turnover of £1 million a year, and you get to £1 million a year, but have you done it well? Have you made the right decisions to get to 1 million? Could that million be 10 million if you just changed one or two minor details? Or if you actually made the wrong decision, could it be 100,000 and not 1 million? And so for me, understand the more you have I hate the phrase 360 view of your business and what is happening with it. I could say holistic as well, another equally hated word in my vocabulary. But it is that point of you are making decisions every single day. You're having conversations, even where you're looking at a sales piece and going, I offered him a 10% discount based on X. That's a decision you have made. Why have you made it? Because again, you talk to business coaches and they'll go through and talk about how discounts and things actually end up being a lot more than what you think they are in the first place. When you understand your numbers and how your profit margin works, a 10% discount could actually be like a 30% margin drop. And so there's so much kind of information data and qualitative data from my perspective that, again, I think is a phrase I don't particularly like and I don't think many people understand, but I basically talk about numbers and words. So you've got your number data, your numerical stuff, and then on my side you've got your words, your conversations, and written words. And it's that's probably not seen as important. But if you are thinking, how do I grow my business? How do I get better? How do I kind of, almost as the chief executive, allow my teams the freedom and the flexibility to go off and do their own things, but I'm still the kind of the master of the ship, and I have to have a level of oversight and control. This is an easy way to do that and to give that insight to people, but based on the fact you all know in what direction you want to be traveling and where you want to get to.
Yeah, but the only way realistically, and I think this also boils down to the problem, is that very data is still incredibly fragmented in a business, and again, cliche, but silos. You have silos within within an organization where that leads to siloed operations, but also siloed decision making. So to be able to create that 360 view, you have to then, it's a phrase I use a lot, is you have to take control of your data and you have to understand what you've got where, and then look to bring that together in a way that be able to you to connect the dots, and then you can see if activity A happens over here, what the impact of that is, and the performance and the outcome of that decision or that operation or that activity. But having that visibility is where I think it starts looking at the perception of data just goes bleh, because it's like, well, we've got, as you say, CRM, we've got a finance system, we've maybe got a point of sale system, we've got something else, we've got a fleet management system. That all these systems, how do we begin to look overall? We can understand how we're performing, but then once you go down, where do we start to piece this together? And I think it's that complex. I mean, it doesn't have to be that complicated. It's something that we've done on a number of occasions, and are working with clients at the moment to do this. But that brings together the point where you leave the operational systems to do what they are designed to do. You're not using them to produce reporting or outputs, but you're bringing it together to be able to, you're taking your data into your world, into your control, which then you can do whatever the hell you want with it. And I wonder if that it's still perceived as big boys and budgets, which is why, and it seems to be, it's perceived to be overly complicated. And I wonder if that's why the perception is, once you start going too far down into looking at the why, the context, the quantitative and qualitative information that is there, does it start becoming a bit of a, because that education is the wrong word, but that knowledge and skill piece is maybe missing, particularly if you're not in a huge organization. Although I'm sure some huge organizations probably still have that problem as well.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely for me, I talk a lot about using the data to use it for continuous improvement, to get better at what you do, whether that is your business plan, your sales plan, your marketing plan, or whether it's delivering programs and projects. You should always be looking at that qualitative data alongside your numbers to basically go, okay, we've delivered this, but did we deliver it well? Could we make it better? Could we do it faster next time, quicker, get more outcomes from the end of it? And so there is a certain skill set within an organization that says, yes, we do want to get better, we do want to improve. And that's kind of almost on you as your own kind of business coach in a way to help and drive that and make sense of what the data is telling you. So yeah, it's something I was actually challenged on the other week, actually, when someone said, okay, I put this data in, but how do I know which bits of the data are the ones that are driving the right behaviors? And it's kind of like, well, it's almost through you understanding your own business and how your business operates that you'll start to pick those things out. And then you will start to figure out, therefore, almost which are the key bits of information and data you need to record and capture, because they're the bits that are going to help you learn and how you move forward. So there is an element of either, for me, kind of like self-coaching, but going into things like the 5 whys or the theory of constraints and start to understand all these concepts as much as what's my profit, what's my margin, what's my revenue, all of that, which has generally been the focus for many, many years for businesses, because that is the thing that determines whether you survive or not. But as you said, beneath that, you've got all these different layers of information that are impacting that we're not necessarily looking at. And I think there is an element of you either start to work with business coaches who can help you interpret that data and understand what it's telling you, or there's an element of you start to understand that yourself. So if you're let's say you're in a project management office or a program management office, you as a small team should be looking at all of your projects and saying, how well did we deliver them? And what do we do to improve next year? If you're in a sales team, yes, they like to focus on the numbers, but actually as a sales team, they should be sitting down and going, okay, this year we delivered X. Next year we need to deliver Y. What did we do this year that we can improve on, enhance on, make different decisions on, and take it forward? So for me, there's the constantly kind of learning about what you do, about your business, how your business operates, what works, what doesn't, to me is just part of the job. But I don't see necessarily that it's something that is picked up and used necessarily, because A, I don't think many organizations actually capture half the data that they should be capturing, and B, I don't really think that they would then know what to do with it if they did capture it.
I think in my experience from kind of slightly on the other side of things is that it's all there. How many operational processes are manual these days? And unless you're trying to produce reporting that is manual, you're pulling information from all these systems to produce some reporting. There's an application or a platform that covers off pretty much all the processes within an organization. So the information is there. It's a case of understanding what is happening and what information is captured. But that then drives from, what are we trying to understand? What are we trying to measure? But then something that I find works really well with with organisations is just mapping, doing a mapping process where you understand, okay, well, what department am I in? What operations are we doing? What activities are we undertaking? What systems are we using? Then you find within that system what information is available. It's like, we want to understand our the performance of a particular activity, but we don't know where it's captured, for example. But then, do you use a system for that? Do you use a platform or an application? No, you are capturing that you're capturing that. You were 100% capturing that information. Now you then go, okay, well then, how do we get hold of that? Well, that's that they will have either their own internal reporting, or they'll have API, for example. They'll have a way for you to pull that information out. But once you've gone through that question framework, you get to a point where you go, I understand now. If I want to improve and measure the performance of that and answer that question, I know where I need to go to look for it and what I need to do. But then, consequently, you look at another kind of thread, and you go, okay, but then you go through the same process. And then you go, well, I can now see how the two influence each other. Yeah. And then suddenly you're building up this picture of what levers and pulleys and things that are happening within your organisation to go, well, if we need to increase our sales, we need to increase our marketing. But what worked well last time? Suddenly you've got this correlation between the two activities. You can see what our customer life cycle is. How does that correlate to sales? How does that correlate to marketing activities? And then you feed back in the loop. Okay, well, how does this now? What changes have been made? What decisions did we make that have then changed this? If we tweak this, what does that happen? What impact is that over here? You're building up this visual of what actually is happening and how it all feeds into each other. And that can be done relatively easily. You can just sit down and work it out, sit down and write it down, and suddenly you build out that awareness and framework that you can then use to move forward, because you can see exactly where everything sits and what's contained in it, what it contains, what information's there, and what decisions you can use that information to influence.
Do you find that takes someone with quite maybe more of an inquisitive kind of mind to start thinking about those things? So historically, obviously, I've worked a lot of local government, and unless the continuous improvement is kind of part of a specific project that is currently happening to us, the minute the project's finished, we kind of just go back into carrying on BAU. Just get on with the day job, whereas actually you want to embed that thinking and what decisions are we making, what is improving, how do we keep getting better.
Even if the world is very rosy,
yeah,
still do it. I mean, don't do it because suddenly something's gone horribly wrong and you're trying to unravel a situation. It's always good to do it before you're looking at making a decision, before you're looking at planning expansion or changes, or if you have had a problem. But often these things can be done retrospectively because something's happened. What's the make hay while the sun is shining and things is the phrase, isn't it? And do like Warren Buffett, you do the opposite of what everything else is going on. So even if things are going really, really well, that's almost the perfect time to do it. Yeah. Because you're not distracted. You're not going down a different path of firefighting all the time. It is a constant process as well. It's a very iterative process. As you say, BAU can come round the corner, but what is BAU? Unless you're constantly not constantly, but unless you're regularly reviewing what information you have, what's happening, can we change the information? Can we improve it? Is there any way we can add another layer of context, weather information over the top, that can suddenly change the view and add another layer of context that shows what happened and why? These things are all should keep moving forward and keep iterating.
Well, you've just reminded me, actually, I don't know if you've seen a bit of segue. There's a TV show at the moment called Double Your Money. It's a quiz show, and effectively they started with £500 and they were given a week to go away and come back with £1,000. And I've not watched it religiously, but I saw one the other week, and I think they had to go from either 2 to 4 or 4 to 8. I can't remember which one it was. But a couple of them chose kind of like outside eating and food and drink stuff, and then spent the week in the UK at the seaside with it absolutely tipping it down, and came back with very little money, very little profit being made off the back of it. And you're kind of going, and even they sort of went, "Oh yeah, the British weather killed us," sort of thing. And you're like, "Are you surprised though? Because it's May. I don't know when it was filmed, but let's assume it was filmed fairly recently. It's May in the UK, and you went to the seaside to sell ice creams. That's hit or miss. It's not going to be a consistent £1,000 a day sort of thing, because one day there might be 20,000 people on the beach, and the next day there might be 3. But again, thinking outside, and okay, I've got access to all this information, all this data. Why aren't we therefore using it? Is it because we don't understand kind of the value of it? We've not seen how we can use it. No one's really shown it before as a concept. And I do think there's I quite like that show because it did highlight that something so simple as the weather that we see every single day, the fact that it basically busted people out of this competition when other people who had put on indoor events had almost quite easily doubled their money through doing these things. It really is a massive impact. And if you don't understand the impact of all these things on your business and the decisions and the changes, then I think in some ways you're failing as an organization. And I know you touched on kind of like sales and marketing. There's a couple of really good books. I'm trying to think the author, April Dunsford, I think is the name. One's called Obviously Awesome, and then she's done one called Sales Pitch. And she's a kind of a branding and expert in putting together your proposition and your proposal and looking at what it does and that. But she says obviously the marketing team spend ages coming up with all this really good stuff about what your organization does, what niche it sits in, what the value proposition is, all of this stuff. And then you hand it over to sales, and sales go and do a bespoke presentation to the customer that talks about something completely different. And even then she's talking about how she doesn't talk about it as in the sense of data, but actually it is, because it's about aligning everything you're doing within the marketing department with everything you're doing in the sales department, so you've got consistency all the way through. And she said she'd seen many examples, I think, where people had hampered themselves because what you'd seen on the marketing efforts, social media, and all this stuff about what the system did and could bring to you, then a sales guy was looking at your competition and redesigning the entire slide deck aimed directly at you as a business, and was basically then putting in the bin all the work that marketing had done. So even simple things like that about the silos and bringing them together and make sure you understand the implications of what marketing are doing on what that brings to the sales team, but then also what the sales team are doing and what they're talking about with customers that needs feeding back to marketing. Because if you're getting the same questions constantly, or the same problems or the same issues with what you're doing, then obviously there's an issue with your messaging and what you're saying to people.
It's connecting the dots, isn't it? It's making that connection between different sections and areas, but having the information to know why something is happening. And I think that it's so, and I guess it's something that is attainable now. Particularly, it is. It's not, even if you just target. Well, I always say you just target one particular question, and then that's how you start to build out any platform, because then you're not committing to a huge, great, massive project with no real end in sight, and then you have to wait 6 months to realize any value. If you target a particular thing that you want to understand, you do that mapping framework exercise to understand what information you need from where, what departments it touches. You're also then bringing in key stakeholders into play, sponsors and advocates that are going to be there, that have a skin in the game of understanding how this works. But then at the end of the process, you're understanding the ultimate aim is to understand what is happening and why, and what you need to do about it. And then having some element of being able to go, well, what does that mean? You can add forecasting on most tools now. You can add an element of forecasting in data and in tools to go on this trajectory, on this blend of information. Where are we heading?
Yeah.
I mean, how often that's there attainable without a huge amount of effort. But it's being able to go, okay, well, what is happening? What do we need to know to understand why something happened, and how can we predict and decide whether to stop that happening again or to repeat it if it went well, but then tying that all together with the overall aim of what you want to achieve as a business. So, but it's piecing that together, but then as soon as you've done that, you've got the kind of the blueprint of what you need to do. And it's always, I guess, interesting, isn't it? Yeah. I guess it is all there. All the information is available. It's just pick what you need and connect it to what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And similarly, I mean, I sit in loads of IT boards and portfolio boards and program boards and lots of meetings. And I know it's the fun life.
You got some Homer Simpson spectacles.
but ultimately, you know what it's like. It's the agenda's sent out beforehand, then the papers are sent out. You all read them. You have a bit of a conversation about them during the meeting. Generally, most of them are approved, rubber stamped, and off you go. But all of those decisions and the conversations around them, okay, they're captured in the minutes of the meeting. They're sent out a couple of days after the meeting. You should quickly scan them and go, that looks about right. And then those minutes are literally never seen again. They're in a drawer, a virtual drawer, put away, filed.
Look, have I got any tasks? No, great.
Yeah. If I've got no actions, I'm not looking at them. And again, you take that information out, you put it into a system where you can look at that information. So even if it's at the end of the year, when you go, right, as a board, I want to see everything we've done, every decision we've made, how we've progressed, how we've delivered this stuff. Very few systems I've looked at give you that insight, and very few organizations actually work in a way where they are looking at it and going, do you know what, this year we've actually delivered everything we said we would, or things have gone wrong, things have gone well. And so sometimes I think it's just about how you capture it as well. So my argument is always that things end up in emails or in Word documents or somewhere where it's kind of unusable as information. And again, you know me, I talk about putting structure around that and giving it a format that you can then use that information for. But it's not that difficult to start to look at all the different tools and things you use and actually say, and just add another field on or add a box on or something. We put a CRM in years ago into a council, and we'd put certain fields in, not because they were useful for the customer service agent in their job, but so that behind the scenes they were really useful for us to understand what was happening and kind of, as we talked about, the volume of calls, why they're coming through, what days they come through, all of that information. But because the customer services didn't see them as important, they never filled them out. And they were kind of almost left out of the loop of why these fields were on the system in the first place. They just wanted to get to the end of the call, put the phone down and fill the notes in and move on to the next call. But everything we wanted them to capture was about how important it was for kind of our business intelligence to say, look, we know what's happening and why it's happening. We can now plan better. And as you say, we can forecast into the future now what we think volumes are going to look like and the types of calls, what moods people are going to be in, all sorts. So
we did something very similar. Yeah. With a contact, it was contact center as well, because within the telephony system, there wasn't the ability, as you say, it didn't give you any kind of context as to what the call was, other than this is where the number, this is what it came in on, this is what happened to it, this was the activity, whether it was put on hold, transferred, or bounced, how long it went, whatever. But there was nothing. How do you categorize that? So you had within the main system the advisor notes, etc. But what we did, and this is the same for any business, is that what we did, because we were taking the information from that system, you can then do what you like with it. So you create your own categories. So we basically worked out call by call and categorized it into a type of call type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10, whatever. And there was call type descriptions. So then all of a sudden you could see not only what happened during the day, but why and the types of things that were happening. Whether you had peaks and troughs of calls coming in after to be transferred because they called on the wrong number. Maybe you had a resource problem at particular times of day. Maybe you were under-resourced. Or maybe the marketing information was incorrect and the phone numbers were incorrect. They were all phoning through on the wrong thing. So it's the same. You think about, if you're doing deliveries and constantly you're having to check that there's something wrong with the delivery or that they're late, but without tagging that and identifying that action, you see activity delivery late. There might be a reason code or something, but then you go, well, okay, reason code doesn't really give me enough. Then you create your own descriptor off of that information. So all of a sudden you've got that extra bit of context that enables you as a business to understand why this has all happened and how you can change what you need to do to change it moving forward. And again, that you can do that in Excel if you really wanted to. Just create a simple formula, and suddenly you're adding this context down. It makes it completely. It changes the view entirely as to what you're looking at.
Yeah, it's about getting people to kind of understand. Sometimes it kind of goes back to the start of, yes, we're talking about data, but actually we just want you to fill some information in some boxes or add some stuff to a system.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So that later on we can use all of that stuff to kind of drive the business forwards and look at how we're achieving and what we're doing. And yeah, people need to get over kind of, when I know we say data and we talk about data and we talk about business intelligence and all of that stuff, there's nothing really that complex to understand about it. It's recording some things that have happened or why, what, when into the system so that it can be used later. And as you said, that could be an Excel spreadsheet that you just do some nice formatting on. It's quite simple to do that. Or it could be a more comprehensive tool. But I think people got suckered in a little bit where some of the early, should we say, business intelligence / visualization kind of tools, you almost had to have a dedicated tech team to build and design and set those up for you. And that did sound complicated before someone could then go in and look at it and use that information. But actually, yeah, you don't have any of that when you're at home. But you're still making decisions every second of the day. You're still looking at information, looking at the TV, reading recipes, looking at the microwave, looking at the oven. It's all information, data kind of
especially
stuff.
when you're hungry.
Yeah, especially when you're hungry. That you live with every single day. Everything you're doing every single day is based on the data you see or feel around you. All we're trying to do is kind of put that into a business context and get in the relevant business data and then put it into a system whereby you can use that. And it just takes a bit of a brain switch, really, I think, to say, actually, as a business, I know I've got a job to do, but ultimately my job is also to make the business better at what it does, make it more effective, more efficient, increase sales, all of that stuff. So therefore, we need to capture all of this stuff on what we're doing, why we're doing, when we're doing it, whether that is what have marketing done recently versus what have sales done versus what have operations done and how do they work. And then almost like find some of the threads through as well and understand the flow that says, well, hang on, they've done something different, which meant they had to do something different and look at the outturn. That worked. We need to go back and revisit that and try it again and try some different kind of hypotheses on it and various other elements. So to me, yeah, data, I think it just got it's just one of those words, isn't it, that people don't like to talk about because it's maths and it's numbers and it's data analysis. But if you just called it things like more sales, increased sales, more sales, better adverts, improved processes, all of that stuff, they're things that people can get on board with and understand. But in order to make more sales, improve your processes, do better marketing, you have to kind of understand what works, what doesn't work for you, and have the data that shows you that.
But you can retain you can retain that layer of definition and knowing and however you want to perceive that data as information. But if you do the underlying connection and work to piece it together, if you want to take it from a particular system, if you've got 7 systems in a business and you go, I have to take information from each bit, type it into something to try and produce any type of meaning for him. By the time you've done that a few times, I don't have time to then go and look at the reasons why something might have happened. Whereas if you can automate some of this, yes, it might be that you need some help. It might be that, is it something that we do, help businesses pull this information out that you need. But then once you've done that, once you've then modeled it and connected it, it then becomes information. It becomes insight. You don't have to think of it as data, but to be able to do that first couple of pieces, which you don't then have to do again, I hasten to add, unless you want to change it or something. But you have to think of data as data. You have to go, for me to get this insight, for me to get this information, I have to do these steps. They're far easier than they ever have been. But the value it creates, it enables you to not, again, as you say, you're not looking at just it as numbers and ones and zeros and maths. You're doing that because you're building that in. So then once you come to make a decision, to understand the performance, to make that connection, to get insight, forecast, projection, you can do all of this across your business for a 360 view. Once you've done that first few steps, but you don't have to then, I think there's been a perception that to do this, you have to do absolutely everything. To get the benefit from data, you have to just bring everything in from absolutely everywhere, try and then work out how you piece it together. And then by the time you got to that point, you've gone, oh, well, you know what? This is just ridiculous. And that used to be the case, and I think the perception is still that is still the case, and it can be in certain circumstances. But if you're looking at, okay, I want to understand A because I'm making this decision, I need to add some context to it. Where does that flow? Where do I get this information from? Can I pull this in? Can I automate it? Otherwise, you're going to have to keep repeating the task every time you want to understand what's happening, whether it was the right decision. You have to do through the manual steps, putting the information together, working it out. By the time you get to the end of that, you're going, I don't really care what the outcome is because I've been staring at this for ages. I hate data. And it's that's the process. Whereas you just go, okay, what do we need to understand? Can we automate it? Can we put it in a way that takes the pain, the horrid, the view, it takes it from data to information, to insight, to decision. To get that out of the way, and suddenly you're in the realms of keeping that nice view of what is going on. You don't have to think about data as data anymore. You can just go, it's there, it's done. I don't have to worry about it.
Well, in my book, Richard, I compared it to a fine wine. You should think about it as a fine wine and how it's shared across the organisation. So does one department open the bottle of wine effectively? So sales have their system, all of their information around the sale is in their system. But then as soon as they've bought it, it goes to a project team, and the project team are opening their own bottle of wine and starting from scratch with their bottle of wine. And then once 100%. It's implemented in live, customer services are then opening their own bottle of wine and starting to do that. And actually, it should be one bottle of wine that's shared across all of them. And they should all be drinking from the same bottle. I think I referenced software.
Stop them all getting pissed as well.
Yes, software being the vessel that you're putting the wine into. So actually, that bit's almost irrelevant. Whether it's whether you're drinking out of a mug or a crystal glass or a plastic cup or something, the quality of the wine and the quality of the data is what's important.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, then making sure that you've got those flows through your business, and you can actually see department to department what's happening, why it's happening, and you're a bit more joined up. That was the only way I could get a wine analogy into the book, so I went with it. But it works when you think about it in that logical ways. Are each of your teams kind of having to open their own bottle of wine, and they're only focusing on that.
We're back to silos again, aren't we?
Yeah, as opposed to sharing it across everyone.
And and it goes back to, taking control of the data, taking control of your information, and don't leave it necessarily in the applications that you've got, because everything then becomes manual. It becomes incredibly tedious and manual, and then you develop this utter hatred of anybody who ever utters the word data. You just want to kill them, and it's boring. It's like Snoozeville, chuck them over the balcony, get rid, horrible. But it's that kind of, that I think is why there's such a bad perception of it, because it's perceived as this. But I've already got an application. It already gives me a dashboard. Yeah, on that system. What about if you want to look at marketing's information? Oh, I have to take it out of the system. So then why are you paying for their dashboard? I'm going to get in trouble for that. But why are you paying for that? Why are you paying for that system? When the system is there to do a job, why are you then? But if you then want to look at it across all different systems, you can't do that. You have to take control of it, or do it manually. And I think that is, I know I've already got 6 dashboards from 6 different systems. I don't want another one. No, but you don't have to. You will have one.
Yeah, funny, I've seen that.
That is an absolute game changer, because then it cuts a huge amount of time, massive amount of time, and then you can start doing the forecasting. What happens if we do this? Because you've got everything together. It's all in one place. It's your data. It's in your control. You can do whatever you like with it.
Yeah, I was going to say,
just keep it safe.
Keep it safe. Where we've looked at replacing systems before, and you're talking to a team, and it's, oh yeah, here's our application. This does everything. And then you go, well, what about this? And they're like, oh yeah, I've got a spreadsheet for that. It's just like, there's information that your system hasn't got in it. You can't use it. Stop hiding it. We need that to kind of give us a complete picture of what's happening, what's going on, and where we're at. So I think we'll probably call it a halt there, Richard, as you've mentioned killing people and other bits on data and keeping it simple. And I think keep it simple should probably be the mantra of every company in the world anyway. It's definitely one that
simplicity and clarity and good communication.
Perfect. So we'll call it a day, and I shall speak to you soon.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
See you. Bye.